Hi, welcome back to Free for All Friday. Just want to issue a point of clarification. When I was talking about the cities of refuge and how you deal with a possible homicide, for some reason the name Florence P. Henderson was the first name that popped into my head. I have no idea why. But I want to be clear that I was not accusing the matriarch of the Brady Bunch of cold-blooded homicide. So just be clear on that. Just popped into my fevered brain from who knows where. So Florence P. Henderson, she is off the hook. I have no beef with Florence P. Henderson. As far as I know, she has never killed any human being, let alone or even a fly, let alone a human being in all of her life. Now, I want to start today. That's Free for All Friday, so we're going to take phone calls on a range of topics, whatever's kind of been in the news that you want to talk about today. But we had this dust-up with World Vision earlier this week, and I want to read some excerpts from a column about Russell Moore. Now, Russell Moore, we got a lot of people listening to us right now that are in the Southern Baptist Convention. And I would love to get your reaction if you're in the Southern Baptist Convention, but I'd like to just get the reaction from evangelicals in general to some of the content of this article, and I'm going to just read excerpts from it, and I would really like to get your reaction to what you're reading here, how you feel about what your reaction is, what you think about Russell Moore, what he's saying in this article, which is on the Washington Examiner, written by Byron York. This guy's an outstanding journalist. I read virtually everything that he writes. He's a solid journalist. He gets his facts straight. And this is a piece that you can trust. There isn't any distortion in this piece. That's what I'm trying to say. Russell Moore has been quoted accurately, I'm quite convinced, in this piece. Now, Russell Moore, for those of you that don't know, he is the president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission for the Southern Baptist Convention. So he is the face and the voice of public policy in the Southern Baptist Convention. So their Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, Richard Land was the guy that was in this role for, 25 years, something like that. So anytime you would have some issue of public policy where some perspective was appropriate from the Southern Baptist Convention, Richard Land and now Russell Moore would be the guy to give it. So this is a position of enormous significance because he is speaking for the Southern Baptist Convention. Now, technically, there may be some Southern Baptists say, no, he's not speaking for us. He's speaking for the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, but it is the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention. So there's no way to get around the fact that when this guy speaks, the Southern Baptist Convention is assumed to be speaking. He is speaking for the Southern Baptist Convention. He is speaking on behalf of the Southern Baptist Convention. As far as public policy is concerned, he is the Southern Baptist Convention. Now, he spoke at a conference of journalists, which was organized by the Ethics and Public Policy Center. He spoke there yesterday. Byron York was there, and I'm going to read you some excerpts from the news story that he wrote about this, his appearance and what he had to say. He was asked, Russell Moore was asked what his ideal presidential candidate would say about the issue of natural marriage. It's called traditional marriage. I use the term natural marriage, which, by the way, I'm not sure that I coined that, but I was one of the early adopters of that phrase, natural marriage. Now it's picking up enough currency that people on the left are criticizing it because they want us to call it traditional marriage. They don't want us to call it natural marriage because they understand the power of language. And whoever defines the terms controls the language, controls the debate. So you define it as natural marriage. They don't like that. They don't want that. So they're critical of the term natural marriage. They want us to go back to traditional marriage because traditional marriage can kind of sound old-fashioned and out of date. So they want us to use that term. Natural marriage is a tougher thing because everybody's into natural stuff, organic stuff and back to nature and being in accordance with nature and one with nature. Everybody's into that. So natural marriage, that's bad for them if that becomes the term of art to refer to man-woman marriage. Anyway, so he's asked about his ideal presidential candidate and what his ideal presidential candidate would say about the issue of natural marriage. Now, notice Russell Moore is being asked here about what your ideal candidate would say. You can pick, this is a hypothetical candidate. You can manufacture him out of your own conscience. this is an imaginary candidate, and he can be anything you want him to be. He can say anything you want him to say on the issue of natural marriage. And here's what Russell Moore says, and I want to see if this satisfies you. I would want a presidential candidate who understands the public good of marriage. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Barack Obama would say that he understands the public good of marriage because he's out there telling dads to be good dads and moms to be good moms. So you ask Barack Obama, do you understand the public good of marriage? He say, sure, I do. So Barack Obama would satisfy this criterion. He goes on to say, so he understands the public good of marriage, understands it, doesn't say he defends it, doesn't say he proclaims it, doesn't say he advocates for it, doesn't say he speaks up on behalf of marriage. He just says he understands the public good of marriage. Might keep it completely to himself, like Dan Cathy at Chick-fil-A is going to do now. We know that Dan Cathy understands the public good of marriage, but he's not going to say a word about it to anybody for the rest of his life. So I want a presidential candidate who understands the public good of marriage and one who is not hostile to evangelical concerns. So he says, this is my ideal presidential candidate. Russell Moore, Southern Baptist Convention, my ideal presidential candidate does not even have to be supportive of evangelical concerns. He doesn't have to have any agreement with evangelical convictions. He doesn't need, I could pick an evangelical to be president because this is hypothetical. Doesn't even have to be an evangelical. My ideal candidate, in other words, is not even an evangelical. He just needs to be somebody who isn't hostile to evangelical concerns. That's a whole different ball game than saying, I want somebody as a president who understands evangelicals, who supports evangelicals, who believes in the value system that evangelicals espouse, who support the right of evangelicals to be involved in the public square, who will back them, who will defend them, who is an enthusiastic supporter of religious liberty for evangelical Christians. And Russell Moore says, I don't need that. That's not my ideal presidential candidate. He just has to be somebody that's not an enemy of evangelical concerns and one who is going to protect religious liberty and freedom of conscience. Okay, fine. He wants a president who will protect religious liberty and freedom of conscience. And the issue he mentioned is these Catholic adoption agencies have been prohibited from placing children in natural families because they have to place them in same-sex families, same-sex households, or they lose the right to be engaged in adoptions. I want somebody who will fight for them. So that's good. We can agree on that. That's a good deal. But listen to this. This is what Byron York says. Now, Byron York's not an evangelical. He's not a Christian. He says, missing from Moore's answer was a firm requirement that a presidential candidate be a vocal opponent of gay marriage. So he says, my ideal candidate is somebody who doesn't say anything about sodomy-based marriage. My ideal presidential candidate doesn't have a problem with sodomy-based marriage. He doesn't have a problem with the act of sodomy. He doesn't have a problem with a culture that embraces it and celebrates it and protects it and gives it special recognition in law. My ideal candidate doesn't have to say a word about those things. Indeed, at another point in his remarks, Moore noted that evangelicals are beginning to realize that American culture is moving towards same-sex marriage. We have been saying, look, same-sex marriage is inevitable in American culture. We need to start preparing our churches for a new generation. So what Russell Moore is saying, hey, there is no point, and this is the leader now, the spokesman for the second largest denomination in America, only behind the Roman Catholic Church. And he's saying, look, there is no point in fighting to protect natural marriage any longer. It is inevitable. There's nothing we can do to stop it. So there's no point. We just got to roll over. We got to lay down. We got to run up the white flag. We just surrender. We capitulate. We concede. The battle is over. We've lost. Now we just got to retrench. We got to get back to where we can maybe protect some modicum of the religious liberties that we have exercised. And so he says we need to prepare our churches for the loss of this cultural battle entirely. York goes on. Moore's fallback position, there's no other way to describe it, is to insist that once the marriage fight is lost, the beliefs of Americans who oppose homosexual marriage on religious grounds be respected. So he says, look, once the marriage fight is lost, that's what we're dealing with here, according to Russell Moore. It's over. It's finito. It's time to recognize reality. It's time to just surrender, run up the white flag, and just retreat and try to salvage what we can. Beg on our knees, plead on our knees for some crumbs from the master's hand. Religious liberty arguments as the last redoubt in the culture war. So we're holed up in this foxhole, and we're fighting with what little energy and what little courage we have. We're fighting to protect some few religious liberty rights. That's Russell Moore's picture of the future. And he says, look, what we're going to have to do is we're going to be left with fighting to live our lives according to our own consciences. Just let us live our lives according to our own consciences. That's the best that he's hoping for, that just we will be left alone and we will be allowed to live our lives according to our own consciences. Well, ask Hobby Lobby about that. Russell Moore, we're way past that. Hobby Lobby can't live their lives according to their own consciences. Conestoga Wood can't live their lives according to their own consciences. Little Sisters of the Poor can't live their lives according to their own consciences. So we've already listened to Russell Moore. That battle's over too, and we lost that one. This guy by the name Tim Carney wrote in the Washington Examiner, he's under no illusion that culture warriors on the left will allow that to happen. Neither is Moore. So he says, essentially, the premise here is we surrender on the issue of marriage. We give up that fight in the hopes that the gay Gestapo will leave us alone. But then you ask Russell Moore, are they going to do that? He says no. They're not going to quit. They're not going to step back. They're not going to give up the fight. And he says, and he goes on to say, look, fighting to have a constitutional amendment defending marriage, he says, is a politically ridiculous thing to do right now. As time goes on, he says, the illusion of a moral majority is no longer sustainable in this country. So Russell Moore, no chance we're going to be a shining city on the hill. That's gone. That's over. Forget about it. Let's retrench, retreat, hold up. Focal Point AFR Talk.